All right, Matthew, I'm here at AHIP. I'm here with Anmol Madan. He is the CEO of a company called RadiantGraph. We haven't been in their booth. Anmol's got a bit of a history in the business. He was one of the original founders of Ginger, which has gone through a bunch of iterations. But when it started, those of you with long memories may remember, was doing kind of assessment of people's mental state by how they were using the phone and that kind of stuff, some cool stuff. Now it's just another boring mental health product company, but back then it was fun. Then he went and was hanging out at Livongo and Teladoc, and now RadiantGraph. So, Anmol, RadiantGraph, AI company doing what precisely?
So, it's a great question, Matthew. I had some great experiences. Ginger Mental Health that I founded and ran for 8 years. Livongo and Teladoc, where I was the chief data AI officer after they went public. The big problem I see in healthcare that led me to start RadiantGraph is there's 1,000 incredible clinical innovations, digital health models, virtual care models. No one's using this stuff. Okay. And the average utilization of these benefits inside a typical payer is 5% of the eligible population. And it's not for lack of spend, right? And so payers spend about 2.5% of all healthcare premiums, $150 billion just trying to get people to engage as part of their admin budget they actually spend. It's not for lack of desire on behalf of the consumer. Many of us actually know people in our lives where they should have been on preventative mental health benefits or MSK, or should have had primary care support early on to protect and support chronic condition management. It's really just a hard problem to solve in healthcare. And as I had some of those experiences, I kind of walked out and I was like, what do I do next? And it felt like if we could solve this problem in healthcare, that was a stepping stone to actually seeing the impact of these digital health solutions on clinical care and ultimately the cost of care. Because sadly, for all the innovation we've seen in that space, and I've been fortunate to be part of some of it with the companies that I was part of, whether you pick your favorite diabetes solution or mental health solution, right? There's 40 million people with diabetes in the US and maybe 1.5 million on any solution that's helping manage their condition. And so I think we haven't solved this. Healthcare costs are still going up 7%, 8% year on year. And so if these solutions, which have proven ROI, they work, are really delivering that impact, why aren't we seeing that in the long-term kind of cost of care? And so I think there's a whole bunch of structural issues. It felt like this is a company that was missing. In every job, I would have to rebuild this platform. My last job, my group was investing about $20 million a year, doing all the data and all those pieces and getting it to work, driving consumer engagement of our programs. And when it worked, it had a massive impact, right? It drove adoption of the program. It was not just economically great for us as a company, but it also was the right thing to do for consumers. So I think for me, it was like, why is this a 2-year, 3-year build? And why doesn't this just work out of the box? And can I just get a solution that does what we had to kind of re-engineer? So that's the thesis behind RadiantGraph. The entire technical team at RadiantGraph, about 40% of the companies is PhDs in machine learning and AI, has been with me the last 2, in some cases, last 3 jobs. And so we've architected these systems. And so for us, when we came together, it was, hey, let's kind of build this in a way that we wish we had access to. This is a platform I wish I had in my last couple of jobs that would allow us to scale. And so that's the thesis behind the company.
All right, so basically, I'll say what I think it is, and then what you're doing, and then you tell me the right thing. You're arriving at a health plan or wherever, you're taking all their various data feeds, messy and incomplete as they are.
Yeah.
I just had a health plan CEO explain to me how he's creating the perfect integrated data lake, blah, blah, blah. You're saying, screw that stuff, we're just going to take all the data as it is, we're going to build an AI layer on top of it, taking that data, and we're going to, using that, create a whole bunch of functions which eventually will do a lot of things, including getting to, advertise and getting people into these care management tools, but a bunch of other stuff as well. So, is that more or less correct?
That's directionally correct, yes. Okay. And so I'll say there are 3 things that have to be true, right? The first is consumers want to be engaged, and I think we have to engage them now, this year, this plan year, not 2 years from now. The second thing that's true is AI is a powerful tool in driving personalization of the healthcare experience. And if you look at every other industry, right, if I pull up the Netflix feed for everybody that's watching this video right now, it's going to look completely different for each one of us, right? But that's not how healthcare works. And so we know how to do this outside of healthcare. We need an easy way to bring this to life in healthcare. And then the third thing I'd say is like, I don't think we can live in this perpetual soup of like, we're going to take 3 more years and build this unified data platform and eventually it's going to work. It has to work in today's data with today's problems. So RadiantGraph is a platform. And it's a flexible platform that captures a lot of technical sophistication, starting from our built-in integrations. And I'm going to go into a little technical jargon now, so please pause me if it's too detailed for this audience. But starting from built-in integrations with all the major cloud vendors, so GCP, Azure, Snowflake, Databricks, really takes 30 minutes to integrate us to any of the major cloud vendors you have. You probably have sparse, messy, incomplete data. There's a little bit of claims, there's a little bit of pharmacy, there's maybe some, 4 versions of Matthew in the system in there. And then our system digests that, goes to our HDE, our health data engine. We do all the common operations, normalization, identity resolution, fix errors. It then goes to a series of powerful personalization capabilities that are for your population, for your use case. So these are AI models that are learning the patterns in your member population, not on some population from some other plan from the 1990s. So they're not clinical rules, they're kind of true AI models. And then it finally goes to RadiantGraph's agentic layer, and voice AI being a big part of it, but also we help you optimize your direct mail, your email campaigns, your legacy marketing that's happening, which is where a lot of people might be discovering things. Healthcare spends a lot of money on phone calls, on direct mail, and sending letters, and so you kind of have to solve for all of that. So that's what the platform does. Healthcare has unique challenges, which is why our belief is that this industry needs its own platform. And so we're really kind of focused on that, and we only serve healthcare, SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, high trust compliant. From the other side of the house, the platform allows configuration for different solutions. And so as a payer, for example, you might be focused on driving the adoption of benefits, preventative benefits in the commercial population, maybe connecting deeper with your Medicare population, so they find the right benefits, they stay with the plan, they get the best kind of care as well as overall cost economic outcomes. In the individual or fully insured population, you're trying to build a relationship with people who are coming in, maybe they've got young families, you're trying to figure stuff out, and so you're helping them. So these are all plethora of use cases. Without RadiantGraph, you have very large teams, operational teams, sometimes technical teams, working with a bunch of non-healthcare solutions, trying to patchwork them together. It costs a lot of money, a lot of time. There's a lot of custom build with RadiantGraph, so this works out of the box and goes live in weeks. And so there's a platform, and then there's the solutions, and we kind of work with you to configure it for your use case so you can see the impact now.
So are all the solutions something to do with touching a member? Because there's a bunch of other stuff that presumably could be done with this in terms of, prior authorization and a bunch of, and provider activity and stuff that health plans have to do. Do you do that as well? Because you are doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah. We do not. And so I think there are 3 big, this is a personal thesis I have for where AI is going. I think there are 3 big areas that we're going to see the impact of AI in healthcare, particularly on the payer and system side, health system side. The first is obviously what we're already seeing, which is the back office, the prior auth, some of the clinical note-taking, the kind of operations on the back end. The second area, which is still early, but I think will emerge more in the next 2 to 5 years, is actual AI integrated in the care experience, right? And so should the basic clinical visits for primary care in 5 years be done with an AI doctor versus a human doctor? And we're a little bit early, but I think that trend is going to be here in 5 years. And then the third area is the front office of healthcare, which is the consumer experience and member experience of healthcare. Our belief is to have an impact, you have to focus. And so we've chosen one problem, one area, which by itself is still very broad, because consumer engagement in healthcare is still very, very broad. Right? I gave you some breadth of examples there. So just doing that right feels like a 10-year build of a company. And so we're kind of focused in that area. Our thesis is that we as consumers are coming in with very high expectations in this day and age, and I think healthcare is not going to be able to cater to that without the right platforms in place to drive that forward. So that's the place where we're coming from. It doesn't mean the other sectors aren't important. I think there's some great companies, there's some great investments, there's a lot of momentum there. It's just that we've chosen that front office, the member experience to play in, because we think just getting that in right is going to unlock a lot of value in our society.
So I'll ask in a few minutes whether you're doing too much or not enough. But for now, why don't you dig in and quickly show some examples of what you have going?
Yeah. And so I'll show you a couple of things here.
Put over your shoulder and look at the screen there. So
yeah, this is great. So I'll show you a couple of things. So this is an example of RadiantGraph's platform. Very specifically, this is designed for the adoption of a diabetes program. Okay. And so prior to coming to this point, you can integrate RadiantGraph with your major cloud vendors. So in this case, we've chosen to integrate with Snowflake and GCP, and also with Salesforce Marketing Cloud, which is the marketing engine, the email delivery engine for this hypothetical.
And the user of this is who at a health plan?
So typically our users are in the marketing, product, or operations teams.
Okay.
And RadiantGraph always goes through a deep review with the CIO and the technical teams. But one of the things that the CIOs love about a platform like ours is while we're technically robust and vetted, it takes away a lot of the back and forth that they're...
So basically the technical folks don't have to supply this in their massive queue of stuff to do for the marketing people.
Instead of a technical person writing a query into a platform, all of that happens inside the RadiantGraph world, and it sort of empowers the users. And so this is an example of the cohorts that were learned for this particular organization, right? So the system digested various kinds of structured, unstructured healthcare data, and it's figured out there are pockets of members in this organization. We call them smart cohorts, and they're not clinical rules, but they're based on your population. You could have 3 different diabetes companies, say Livongo, Word, Omada, have different people using their product inside smart cohorts.
So how do you, who's defining, so now you've got a fairly, you've got a bunch of stuff there defining that cohort. Who's defining that? Is that the system itself? Is that the medical director sitting around saying, I only care about people with A1Cs of...
Yeah, so with smart cohorts, the initial definition is done by our systems.
Okay.
And so the systems are saying, okay, these are the populations of interest that we're discovering in your population. However, like most things, we do give our users a way to kind of say, okay, these smart cohorts, let's take these out, they're less interesting.
Yeah.
And so it allows, you could generate a vast variety of, you could have like dozens and dozens of populations of interest, and then that becomes a starting point for how you engage those populations in the next step that I'll show you. You can go in and say, great, I want to go write campaigns that talk to these members and engage them, right? So let's just say you're talking about, hey, I've got to go off and get people in their annual checkup for diabetes, and then you can choose the smart cohorts that are the most relevant for that based on what you saw before. You can choose the campaign, so you can say, hey, I want to send an email to my Salesforce Marketing Cloud integration. I want to also send direct mail to my direct mail vendor, and I also want to do voice AI. And then you can kind of go in. Our system personalizes your templates and emails for each subgroup. It lets you export that into your systems. You can also go deeper and create your own content. So you can pick the use cases and pick the program, and then the system will write the content for you if needed. And so a lot of the investment in legacy creative teams where you'd have people kind of write content now goes here. You can kind of add your brand guidelines, you can add your legal guidelines, you can kind of upload a lot of that information. And then, and the last piece I'll show you here, and we'll go into more detail, is you can also then tie this back to voice AI campaigns that we're running. So in this case, you can look at the calls that are happening for this particular organization, what happened. I'll play some of the calls for you. A huge part of RadiantGraph's value and where we differ from a lot of the I'll say commodity or sort of broad voice vendors is we've thought through the integration in healthcare specific use cases. Nobody in healthcare is going to completely replace their call centers today with just voice AI. There's always going to be a handoff. That's where the industry is right now. So a huge part of it is how do you take this information from an AI call and then send it over to a human call center that might be going in. So we call it the priority.
When I shout operator into the voice response that Blue Shield of California and never does. Hopefully you got it.
Yeah, so I think those are, it's we're at an interesting point where many of the voice AI use cases you've got to figure out the connection between the human and the AI system, and they're good at different things, and I think that's where some of this sort of fits in. So this is all an example. Again, RadiantGraph is pretty broad, so we can configure.
So basically, one person sitting in marketing can configure this relatively quickly. I assume once you've got the basic pipe. How long does it take you to sort of from the CEO saying go, or whoever says go, to actually getting this available for the marketing team?
We have, so from the point contracts are signed and we are a go, to actually launching AI-based campaigns, typically it's about 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
And so that's the integration with the data, that is understanding patterns in your population, that's generating the smart cohorts that you see here, and that's writing the campaigns all the way down, including legal approval as needed. And so it's very high throughput, very efficient. And I think, the challenge I've seen in past lives is for most of large plans, just doing the data stuff is a 3-year journey.
Yeah.
And so I would like to live in a parallel universe where that is not the case, where all of us fundamentally have a much better healthcare experience and every interaction feels like it was designed for us. And this is our attempt at building that parallel
So, but
universe.
basically you're saying that the beauty, the secret sauce of RadiantGraph is the ability to take that data, messy as it is, and, the data extraction normalization is a big part of this, right?
Yeah, it's just not just taking it's designing the entire system from end to end.
Okay.
Right? And so you shouldn't, as a user, as a healthcare organization, you shouldn't have to worry about all these technical details. Like, you're in the business of delivering care, or making sure you have the right benefits for your members. And so let's help you do the stuff you're good at, and let us solve the data ingestion, the AI model configuration, the creating the campaigns and pushing those out. Like, I think systems should do that. And so, to your point earlier, typically inside a mid-sized large peer, you look at all these different jobs, from the data engineering all the way to the marketing agency doing the campaigns. We're talking about 50, 100 people. And I think in an AI-centric universe, you only need 3 people.
Okay.
Right? That's the world I think we're marching towards. And so you can use those resources more effectively, you can do more, you can test more ideas, and you can do them with a much, much, much smaller footprint. And let's use machines in the most powerful way to drive that outcome. That's what we're building towards.
All right.
I want to take a minute and just quickly show you some voice AI capabilities here as well. And so these are, I just play some recordings. I'm not sure if you're able to hear them, but there's a number of voice AI use cases in healthcare. In this case, we've listed out examples of completing information when you're onboarding for Medicare, for example, or driving the adoption of preventative care benefits, or boosting the adoption of health utilization. There are 3 major differences between RadiantGraph's voice AI stack and what you might see from a lot of the horizontal players that are coming to talk about voice. Number one, we only do healthcare, and we only do consumer engagement use cases in healthcare. So we're not doing deep clinical stuff. We're not doing care management. We're just doing consumer engagement in healthcare. We think getting that right is really hard. Doing that right for different regions, different languages over time, different accents, different needs, like in taking up and down information, integrating with human workflows is really hard. So that's one big difference. The second big difference, it's pre-integrated into our platform. And I've heard this now from multiple CIOs inside large plans, both in Medicare and in commercial, where they've said, hey, look, I can see the voice AI thing, but I still don't know how to integrate this with my core data system, and we need to build this. And with RadiantGraph, we don't have to do that, right? And then the third piece is it's important to have the right validation for anything in healthcare, right? So you have to kind of test all the scenarios of things that can go wrong for any agent use case that we support. We've done hundreds of hours of testing with US-based healthcare professionals. We now have fairly sophisticated infrastructure where voice AI agents automatically test every small release and improvement and call the agents and do that testing. And so these are all examples of things that we support today. And I think that's really important, because if we're going to bring voice AI into healthcare, it can't just be another prototype. It has to be something that's really well thought through and designed for real healthcare use cases. So I can try playing the audio here.
Pick it up.
Hello, this is an AI virtual agent from Member Services at Local Advantage Plan. We're reaching out to welcome you to your new health plan. Are you interested in learning more about how the plan works and what benefits are included?
Sure, I've been meaning to call.
Great, I appreciate your interest. Before we dive into the details, I need to verify your identity to ensure your privacy. Can you please confirm your first and last name?
Yes, my name is Anna Taylor.
Thank you, Anna Taylor. I appreciate that. Now, the purpose of my call today is to confirm that you are set up to use your new plan and to go over the benefits available to you. This will take about 10 to 15 minutes. We will discuss your membership card, creating a web account, and your available benefits, such as silver sneakers, transportation benefits, and over-the-counter debit card benefits. Does that sound good to you?
Yes, I'd like that. I'd like to learn more.
Perfect. First, let's confirm if you have received your membership card yet. Have you received it in the mail?
Yes, I just received my card last week.
That's great to hear, Anna. Now, have you created a web account yet? If not, I can help guide you through the process.
Whoops, I don't think I created that web account yet.
No problem at all. Creating a web account is a simple process, and it will allow you to access important information about your benefits.
I guess it's a pretty good idea.
Thesis is all of this should just work, right? And you should be able to just plug in the right tools into your cloud infrastructure where you've got some messy data figured out. By the time I imagine this gets published, we'll have some more news coming out next week. We actually just won $1 million from Databricks last week as the best kind of.
That's very nice. And they have lots of money, I understand. So that's good. So let's take a step back. I want to talk three quick things. One, sort of the scale of the company.
Yeah.
You started this 2022? Am I right?
Yeah, the company is just under a couple of years old, and we've had a product in market with peers. I'd say just about a year, even less than a year.
Give me a flavor of how many people you are, how much you raised, where you are in that kind of company life cycle.
We've raised just about 15. A little over 15 million. At Series A was 11, and then we had a seed round before that. Companies, everybody, product, data, AI is based out of San Francisco, which is where we are in the office. I'm in the office 5 days a week. It's about 15 people or so. So still very small, very much a baby startup company. Working with, I'd say about six to eight sort of digital health type companies that have been great early partners for validating our product, and then working with one large national player, and then some blues as well. So,
okay, can you name the customers? Or not yet. All right, you don't have to.
Yeah,
you're looking shy and embarrassed, but at some point you will. Yeah. So this leads me to the second question, right? Which is you're doing a lot. There are people doing each individual part within healthcare. What you're doing, the data integration part, the sort of AI layer, and many of the functions that you're taking there are individual companies, right? And then there are obviously very well-funded voice AI only companies in healthcare. Obviously, Hippocratic's one of them, but you got Ellipsis Raceway last week, blah, blah, in the space. So, are you doing too much? And then conversely, are you doing not enough? Should you be doing a bunch of other functions with all the data you're taking out?
Yeah, I think, there's sort of different ways to look at the world, right? Our thesis, and this has been my experience with some of the voice AI capabilities, unless you're training foundational models where you're going to go compete with like a Meta or an OpenAI and go spend $1 billion on training on custom data, I think it's really hard to make the case for spending, raising more money to spend it on GPUs. I think it's a hard case to make, right? And I think we've all seen this in healthcare where companies, and again, I think there's some great companies there. I'm a huge fan of some of the folks individually. I know them personally. So it's not about the people, but I think as a company building philosophy, I'm in the camp of like capital efficiency is important. Just because it's an AI hype cycle, just because people are willing to write checks at high prices, at least in healthcare, it doesn't change the buying motion. It doesn't change the conservative nature of our industry, especially when you set into payers and even systems for that matter. And so I think companies need to be prudent with capital, and unless you have a real need to kind of go off and spend $5-10 million a month on training with GPUs, and there are some use cases where that is true. It's hard to make that case for what we're doing, right? The limitation is not the LLM component. So I think I'm a fan of companies should be built in step functions, and as you build out the proof points, as when we did our Q4 of last year, we had people willing to write much bigger checks at higher prices. That's probably the only founder that you'll ever talk to who's like, actually no, let's do it here, and we're going to raise so much, and if we need to, we can raise more. Because healthcare just takes time, and the worst you can have is a burden of a very high valuation that we can't justify. Because it was cool in the AI era, but 10 months, 24 months from now, when the hype cycle dies down and people are looking at what has worked, you're going to have to justify those numbers, right? So I think that's a personal philosophy, just having been in companies and having also been an investor. I'm a personal investor in about 20-25 companies in infrastructure, healthcare, and AI as an angel, and I kind of have seen the pattern across different paths as well. So I think that's a building choice. In terms of why putting it all together in one platform, my thesis here is there's a number of point solutions that do a little bit of each. And then the place where healthcare gets stuck is trying to cobble them together into one system. That's where you're seeing the 2-3 years of build time or the huge spend on internal engineers or consulting firms to try to make it work. And I think if you're going to be a player, this is my personal thesis, this is the thesis behind the company. If you are going to be a player in that, then I think it just has to work. I think healthcare buyers are jaded. I think they're tired of being sold. I think they're tired of hearing that it's going to happen. I think people just want to see the whole thing working, and then they want simplicity matters in healthcare. These are not technology companies. These are businesses that are focused on care delivery or focused on members, building on member benefits. And they shouldn't have to go and run an engineering team as big as a Google or a Facebook just to do their job. That's not the business they're in. And frankly, I'd say the healthcare margins don't justify that either, right? These are, in many cases, depending on whether it's a plan or a system, we're talking about 10, 15, 20% margins. That includes admin fees in there if it's a payer. And so I think to me, this should just work. It needs to be a platform that works out of the box, which means that there's no burden on RadiantGraph to be flexible, to show the proof points, to make it easy to configure. And that's where we end up working pretty closely with partners to make sure they get the most results out of the platform in the shortest amount of time possible.
All right, and the converse question of that is the advances we're seeing on a sort of weekly basis from the big LLMs, right, who are investing gazillions of dollars, mostly in NVIDIA. That's what I can tell. But, some of the things they're doing are remarkable. And I'm wondering, do we end up needing a bunch of specialist healthcare-only AI companies like you, or does it work that, ChatGPT will do it all for us?
This is where nuance matters, right, Matthew? So we actually, for the LLM layer...
You mean nuance as the phrase, not as the company?
Not as the company, yes. Details matter. And so we don't train our own LLMs from a foundation, right? And so we played a lot of fine-tuning. We do obviously build on top of both OpenAI and Anthropic. We support both in the back end. We've done some work with Llama on our space as well. So I think we're flexible, and if tomorrow there's a better generation of LLM, we're going to build on top of that and integrate that with all the healthcare-specific guardrails and protections that are needed in our system. So I think that's part of the advantage. That's what allows us to be capital efficient when it comes to voice AI and even content generation, which is a LLM-dependent capability. I think at this point in time, our personal thesis is unless you're doing something really unique about clinical diagnosis or treatment decisions, or very specific healthcare, kind of use cases that require that level of clinical expertise, I think it's hard to make a case for training your own models versus just using OpenAI or Anthropic or your favorite of the big four for operational or engagement use cases in healthcare. You still need the protections and the guardrails, but I don't think you should be spending $1 billion.
But do you think that they themselves will just end up being the solution for much of this stuff, or do you think, obviously you bet the fact that there's a role for coming out in RadiantGraph, but tell me why, why I won't just be able to switch on open, ChatGPT to do it for me.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear looking at the direction of some of those companies. Again, world's evolving. A year from now, who knows what it looks like, right? But I think a couple of trends are pretty clear. I think, when you become a large platform, you kind of have to choose between being a platform versus running the applications on the platform. And so if iOS starts, I use Apple as an example of a platform that's very mature. If iOS starts creating the most successful apps on their phone as part of the Apple Store, that's going to be problematic. So scare away a lot of people building on top of these platforms. I think when I look at OpenAI or some of the larger LLM companies, at least in what we've heard them say at events and things, is they want people to build incredible use cases and verticals and solutions on top of their platform, right? So I think that's kind of part one. I think part two, when it comes to healthcare, our learning is, it's quick. It's pretty easy to spin up a prototype. It's really hard to get the last 1% and the last 0.1% and actually make sure it's safe in a variety of situations. Not just things like hallucinations, but also a lot of just people, taking the conversations in a different way, asking about things that are not relevant. So getting all of that right is actually quite hard. And so that takes a lot of time, effort, clinical testing. And I don't think, at least in the current climate, I don't think the tech companies want to take that on because it's a different level of liability, right? It's the same way that Google search is not going to diagnose you on the web, but they'll give you some relevant information. And on the other side of it, I don't think payers or systems want to take that on either because, the liability risk of them being wrong and somebody having an adverse situation is also very high. So I think it creates an opportunity in today's market, based on what we're hearing from both sides, to be the platform that kind of enables that and makes that in. So that's our thesis.
That's a good, robust defense. I do talk to doctors and therapists all the time. I hear them saying, no, I think ChatGPT is replacing you already. But You're right. There's a bunch of stuff between here and there.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take one adverse event just to restart the conversation. And I think ultimately it comes down, and I actually just had a piece come out yesterday about regulation in healthcare and where AI regulation should go. And I think we need to have, just as the FDA has had standards for radiology, imaging, machine learning applications, I think it is probably going to be a similar evolution of how we think of standards for LLM. And I think people are going to have to invest in the validation process and publish that work over time for them to be able to claim voice AI use cases in our case, which is a stance that we have. So the research and the investment in that is crucial for our business.
Fantastic. All right, well, that's great. Great to delve into your now quite extensive and lengthy knowledge of machine learning, AI, all that kind of good stuff in healthcare. You've been doing for far too long by now. So congrats on what you've done so well with RadiantGraph, Anmol. I've been talking to Anmol Madan. He is the CEO of RadiantGraph. And a robust defense of why we need specialist companies like this to fix all the problems we have in at least member engagement in healthcare. Anmol, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.